All right, hello, Honors 410. So here we are at our very last session here together. I want to thank everyone for a great session overall. I'll save my sappy farewell stuff for the very end of the video here. But to dive in, we have one final reading assignment for today from the McBee collection. It's Learning to Fly. And I'll be transparent, this is my favorite story from the collection. Before I started assigning this whole collection, I actually just assigned this story in this class. And so I thought it was a fitting note to kind of wrap up the class on as well. So in this story, I want to, as I often do, start with our very first paragraph here in sharing this one, and then we'll jump around to some other spots as well. So the first paragraph reads, "The day Tim quit his job at Taco Bell was the first time," which is funny because when you think of a person flying, you might think of Peter Pan and happy thoughts. But I wasn't having happy thoughts that night. I was tossing and turning and praying in my head. God, what are we going to do? Or more likely, what am I going to do? That, God, is a more realistic question. This first paragraph here, as always, I want to just ask a little bit about kind of what it's establishing for us here. More specifically, though, what the effect is of invoking Peter Pan here, what sense we make of that, why that's in there in this story. But also in those last few sentences there, the contrast between I and we. What does that actually mean in this context? What is McBee kind of getting at? Going ahead here a little bit, I wanted to jump to page 44 and look at the middle paragraph here. It's one that starts with "I flew further." So I flew further and further, looking for crimes to happen in town so I could swoop down and save the day. But I didn't have X-ray vision or anything, and in our town, crimes usually happened inside, not out on the street. The best I could do was to shoo a cat away from a nest of baby birds and put him back on the ground. That fluffy monster gave me a hell of a scratch on the inside of my arm. So with this, this paragraph always kind of stands out to me just kind of for its practical sensibility here. She's not actually a hero in this situation here. There's the practical considerations of not having X-ray vision and so not really being able to see what happens, of trying to help the cat. What's the cat going to do but kind of scratch someone, not really understanding what's going on or feeling kind of defensive in this situation. So in any event, I'm curious to kind of get your reactions here as well. But carrying on from there, I want to read the paragraph from 44 into 45. So it reads, "It wasn't long before things began to get tense again between Tim and me. We were both really having a hard time on the job and with my parents. I was constantly late for work for dropping the kids off. I just lost track of time, and flying was exhausting. Every day at work, I nodded off at least twice. Bad news for loss prevention and Best Buys everywhere. But I could fly." So this section here, I'm especially interested in the way that this ends here, that italicized, "but I could fly," which is sort of separates from the rest of kind of the voice of the piece. It's kind of this like exclamation here at the end of the expression, and also a little bit of a refrain, a little bit of coming back, as we see the previous section also ended with the same words, "I could fly." But what sort of the impact of that interjection is at this stage of the story? Carrying on from there, on page 48, there's that middle paragraph there. Let's see, starting "of course." So it reads, "Of course I did, but I was afraid to say anything. I was afraid people would hide from me, that they would never talk to each other because they'd think, oh no, grandma's listening." This whole point here about the grandmother actually hiding her superpower, for lack of a better way of saying it, her hearing power, what's kind of the impact of that? Why does she hide it, and what does that kind of contribute to the story here? Going on to 49 here. Let's see, where is this? Let me read the second to last paragraph here. "Then it occurred to me that most of what I said inside my head, where grandma couldn't hear it. But how often did I think of something and not say it? 10 times a day? 20? My grandma Dutchman knew everybody better than they thought. But not me, really. No one really knew me." And so with this, I'm going to suggest in part this sort of being almost a thesis for this story. Again, pieces of short fiction don't typically have thesis statements, but a sort of central messaging here, a central idea to kind of take from this. This idea that people, not knowing each other really, specifically women in their lives, women being sort of silenced, scared to show what they can do, sort of disenfranchised for it. That often feels like it's kind of at the heart of this story, to me at least. Carrying on from there, though, I want to kind of get at the overall big decision our protagonist makes in this story, where ultimately she decides to fly away and leave her family, not just leaving her husband, but also her kids in this process. And I'm just curious as to what you made of this, what we think of her choice, what we think of the character based on this choice, and what kind of messaging this story ultimately has because of this. I'm going to say one take on this that certainly leaps out to me that you may or may not completely agree with, is this sort of being a feminist statement about sort of rejecting a traditional role as a woman here. But I'm really interested to hear kind of your reactions to this as well. And then finally, at the bottom of 53, at the very end of the story here, we have, then I flew myself dry above a bed of mean clouds. It was the best thing I ever did. How would this be the best thing that she has done, even in this story, let alone in her whole life? What sense do we make of that ending? Okay, so as always, please feel free to jump to other parts of this story as well. But with that, that brings me to the end of what I have to share with all of you, at least via video lecture format here. So with that, I want to say something that I say to all of my classes at the end. I know it's a little bit different with an online class, but particularly because I know that for many of you, if I haven't had you in a class before, we may not have actually met in person. We may not have actually interacted in real time over the course of this session. But I do nonetheless like to make sure the messaging is clear. So I consider it to be the case that once you're my student for life. So that doesn't mean I'm going to assign you additional reading assignments or essays or anything along those lines after the class is over. But what it does mean is that I hope you will still feel free to reach out to me. If you have questions that I might be able to help answer for you as an English professor, as a part of UNLV, as a part of the Honors College, as someone who's got a little bit more life experience than most people in the class, please feel free to reach out. And otherwise, please feel free to keep in touch. With these online classes, you might have to remind me of how I know you and kind of what your work was like for the class, just because without a face to put to the name on a consistent basis, sometimes my memories fade pretty quickly of exactly who was who in classes like this. But give me a little bit of a reminder, and I'll remember who you are. And so nonetheless, I would love to still be able to keep in touch, hear about what you're doing, how you're doing. If you don't need anything directly from me, I think it's still great to hear from former students. All right, thank you again so much for everything you've done in the class over the course of this summer. I'll look forward to our final discussion, but otherwise wish you all the best for wrapping up the rest of your summer, and hopefully I will see you around.